click, click, click. A white cane tapped against cracked concrete. 9-year-old Kayla James walked through the dark, her small hand brushing the chain-link fence she knew by touch. She was black, blind since birth, and she was not alone. "He's following me home." The whisper left her lips like a prayer nobody would hear. It was nearly midnight. Her jacket was thin, the zipper stuck, one sleeve bunched up wrong. She smelled urine from the alley, engine oil from a nearby driveway, and behind her, cheap cologne, cigarettes, the metallic salt of a man who worked on cars and kept secrets. She knew that smell. She'd been smelling it for weeks. The footsteps behind her matched hers exactly. When she sped up, they sped up. When she slowed down, they slowed down. When she stopped completely, the breathing behind her stopped too. He was close enough to grab her if he wanted. The neighborhood was silent, no cars, no voices. Even the dog that usually barked twice had gone quiet, like the whole block knew something was wrong and had decided not to get involved. 3 blocks away, 85 motorcycles sat in a garage, their engines cooling. The men who rode them didn't know a little girl was walking home alone. They didn't know a predator was matching her footsteps in the dark. They didn't know that in 15 minutes, everything would change. Kayla didn't know yet that 85 engines were about to answer a prayer she hadn't spoken aloud. Before we go any further, if you believe that sometimes help comes from the places you'd least expect, subscribe to Biker's Bite. Hit the bell. Because what these men did next, you're not ready for it. Kayla had memorized her route home by sound. The rusted fence that groaned when the wind pushed it. The hollowed oak that smelled like wet wood. Mrs. Lemon's stoop, where the third step always squeaked. The dog that barked twice, then stopped. She had walked this path 1,000 times. She knew every sound it was supposed to make. But tonight, there was a new sound. Footsteps that weren't hers. Heavy, patient. The kind that stopped when she stopped. The kind that waited when she waited. The city had failed her before. Teachers missed how she flinched at men's voices. Neighbors called her imaginative. Police once told her mother, "Maybe teach her not to be so scared." But Kayla wasn't imagining this. The man behind her hummed a TV jingle, soft and low, like he wanted her to think of something innocent, like grocery stores, like Saturday morning cartoons. He'd done this before. She recognized the tune. He left pennies on her back step every Tuesday. He knew her schedule. He knew when her mother worked late. And tonight, he was closer than he'd ever been. They found her because fear makes sound. At 11:52 p.m., the first motorcycle rolled onto her block, then 2 more, then a dozen, then 50. Headlights cut through the darkness. The rumble shook the windows. 85 leather-clad men on chrome machines, turning the cracked street into a wall of metal and light. The first to kneel was Marcus Rivera. They called him Doc, ex-medic, steady hands, silver at his temples. He'd held dying men together in the desert. Tonight, he put one gloved hand on a trembling little girl's shoulder. "Kayla," he said softly, "you doing okay?" She heard the kindness first, then the sighs. 85 engines humming behind him like a choir. "He's following me home," she said. "He's behind me. I can't see him, but he's there." Doc's jaw tightened. Behind him, Patch pulled off his helmet, scars down one side of his face, a stare that made grown men look away. He crouched next to Doc. "We heard you," Patch said. "You're with us now." Neighbors peeked through curtains. Nobody came outside. In this neighborhood, you didn't get involved, but the bikers were already involved. Skeets stood at the edge of the group, scanning the darkness. His eyes found what the others missed. The man stood at the edge of the light. Clean shirt, pressed pants, hands in his pockets. He looked like any neighbor out for a late walk. He volunteered at the PTA. He mowed his lawn every Saturday. He smiled at children, Nobody thought to suspect, but Skeets watched the way the man's eyes flicked to Kayla, quick, hungry, then away. The way his weight shifted when the headlights swung toward him. The way he didn't run when he saw 85 bikers. He just turned and walked back into the shadows, slow, patient, like he knew he'd get another chance. That's what made Skeet's blood run cold. Guilty men run. This man walked away like he had all the time in the world. Doc looked up. "What is it?" Skeet stared at the place where the man had been standing. His voice came out low and hard. "We got a problem, and it ain't walking away." Doc didn't let go of Kayla's shoulder. Not yet. The other bikers had formed a loose circle around them, engines still rumbling, headlights turning the cracked sidewalk into a stage. Neighbors watched from behind curtains, but nobody stepped outside. Nobody called out. In Westwood, you learned early that some things weren't your business, but this little girl was about to become everybody's business. "Kayla," Doc said, his voice low and steady, "how long has he been following you?" She didn't answer right away. Her fingers tightened around her white cane, knuckles pale against the plastic. She had learned a long time ago that telling the truth didn't always help. Sometimes it made things worse. Sometimes adults smiled and nodded and then did nothing at all. But something about Doc's voice was different. It didn't sound like he was waiting for her to be wrong. It sounded like he was waiting for her to be believed. "Weeks," she finally said. "Maybe longer. I don't know when it started. I just know when I started noticing." Patch crouched lower, bringing his scarred face level with hers. "What did you notice?" Kayla's breath shook. "He walks 2 steps behind me. Always 2. He hums this song. I think it's from a commercial, like he wants me to think about grocery stores or something normal. And every Tuesday," she paused. Her voice got smaller. "Every Tuesday, he leaves a penny on my back step." The bikers exchanged glances. Skeet's jaw tightened. Doc's hand on her shoulder squeezed once, not hard, just enough to say, "Keep going." "I can't see him," Kayla continued, "but I know things about him. I know he smokes. I know he works on cars. His hands smell like metal and oil. I know he wears the same cologne every time, the cheap kind that burns your nose. And I know," her voice cracked, "I know he's getting closer." Doc reached into his jacket and pulled out a small flashlight. He clicked it on and swept the beam across her jacket, the thin fabric, the stuck zipper, the sleeve that was bunched up wrong. "What's in your pocket?" he asked. Kayla hesitated. Then slowly, she reached into the lining of her jacket, not the main pocket, but a hidden seam she had picked open herself, a secret place where she kept things she didn't want anyone to find. She pulled out a cracked dime, a thread, dark, maybe from a glove, and a folded piece of paper creased so many times the edges had gone soft. "I can't read it," she said, "but I know the folds. He dropped it near my bus stop 3 weeks ago. I picked it up before he could get it back." Doc took the paper carefully, like it was evidence at a crime scene. He unfolded it under the flashlight's beam and read it silently. His face didn't change, but something behind his eyes went cold. Patch leaned in. "What does it say?" Doc handed him the paper without a word. Patch read it, and for a moment, the scar on his face seemed to deepen. It was a schedule, Kayla's schedule, her bus times, her walking route, the nights her mother worked late, everything written in neat, careful handwriting, like a grocery list, like something ordinary. "He's been planning this," Patch said quietly. "This isn't random. This is a hunt." The bikers moved fast after that. 2 of them, younger guys with hard eyes and soft voices, walked Kayla to a bench under a streetlight and stayed with her while the others talked in low voices. She could hear fragments of their conversation, words like police and evidence, and that piece of, followed by something she wasn't supposed to hear. But Kayla had been listening to things she wasn't supposed to hear her whole life. That's how blind people survived. You learned to catch the words people thought they were hiding. You learned to read the silences between sentences. She heard Skeet say, "We need to find out who this guy is." She heard Doc say, "I might know someone who can help." And she heard Patch say, very quietly, "If the cops won't listen, we make them listen." 20 minutes later, they had a name. The man's name was Gerald Hinton, 46 years old, divorced, no kids of his own. He lived 4 blocks from Kayla's house, in a beige, ranch-style home with a well-trimmed lawn and an American flag hanging by the front door. He volunteered at the PTA. He taught ballet to children at the community center on Saturday mornings. He donated money to the after-school program where Kayla sometimes waited for her mother to pick her up. On paper, Gerald Hinton was a model citizen. The kind of man neighbors described as quiet and helpful and always willing to lend a hand. But paper doesn't show you the texts on a man's phone. One of the bikers, a guy they called Wire, who had done things with computers that probably weren't legal, had pulled Gerald's phone records. Not the official way, the other way. The way that gets results when the system is too slow to care. The texts were all to the same number, a prepaid phone that had been purchased with cash 3 months ago. The messages were short, casual, the kind of thing that wouldn't look suspicious if you didn't know what you were looking at. "See you Friday. I'll walk you home. Don't be scared. I'm a friend." The phone belonged to Kayla, or rather, it had been given to Kayla, slipped into her backpack at the after-school program, with a note that said it was a gift from a friend. She had never used it. She couldn't see the screen, but she had kept it because she didn't know what else to do, and because throwing it away felt like admitting something was wrong. Something was very wrong. Wire pulled up the CCTV footage from the liquor store on the corner of Kayla's street. 5 different nights over the past month, the same sedan had been parked across from her bus stop. 5 different nights, the same man had sat in the driver's seat, watching, waiting. On 2 of those nights, he had gotten out of the car and followed her for half a block before turning back. He was testing, practicing, getting bolder each time. The school counselor had a file too. 3 incidents over the past 6 weeks, times when Kayla had come to school upset, times when she had told a teacher that someone was watching her. Each incident had been logged, documented, and filed under anxiety-related behavior. The counselor had recommended that Kayla's mother consider therapy. Nobody had recommended calling the police. "The system didn't fail her," Doc said quietly, looking at the stack of evidence spread across the hood of his bike. "The system ignored her. But here's the part that made everything worse. The part that turned Doc's anger into something colder and sharper. Kayla's mother, Tasha, had tried. She had called the police 6 weeks ago, after Kayla first told her about the footsteps. She had described everything, the sounds, the smells, the pennies on the doorstep. She had begged them to investigate. The officer who took the report had smiled at her, patient, condescending, the kind of smile that says, "I'm humoring you," without saying the words out loud. "Ma'am," he had said, "your daughter is blind. She can't see who's following her. She can't describe his face. She can't give us a license plate. What exactly do you want us to do?" Tasha had tried to explain. Kayla knew things. She could hear things, smell things, feel things that sighted people missed. Her blindness wasn't a weakness. It was a different kind of seeing, but the officer had already made up his mind. "Kids have big imaginations," he said, "especially kids who are different. Maybe she heard something on TV. Maybe she had a bad dream. I'm sure it feels very real to her, but without evidence, there's nothing we can do." Tasha had left the police station with her hands shaking, and that night, exhausted from a double shift at the hospital, worn down by years of fighting systems that didn't care, she had said something she would regret for the rest of her life. She had looked at Kayla, sitting small and scared at the kitchen table, and she had said, "Baby, maybe you just imagined it." She didn't mean it. She was tired. She was scared. She was trying to make the fear go away by pretending it wasn't real. But Kayla heard something different. She heard, "Nobody believes you." She heard, "You're alone." After that night, Kayla stopped telling her mother about the footsteps. She stopped telling anyone. She started keeping her own evidence: the dime, the thread, the folded note, hidden in the lining of her jacket, like secrets she was saving for a day when someone might finally listen. That day had come, and it had arrived on 85 motorcycles. The villain wasn't a monster. That was the problem. Monsters are easy to spot. They look wrong, they sound wrong, they make your skin crawl the moment you see them. But Gerald Hinton didn't look wrong. He looked like a neighbor. He looked like a volunteer. He looked like the kind of man who helped old ladies carry groceries and waved at children on their way to school. His voice was warm, friendly, the kind of voice that made parents feel safe leaving their kids in his care. He had been teaching ballet at the community center for 8 years, and in all that time, nobody had ever complained. Nobody had ever suspected. That's what made him dangerous. He knew how to wear kindness like a mask. He knew how to bury threats inside offers of help. He knew how to make a little girl feel like she was the crazy one, like she was imagining things, like nobody would believe her, even if she told. And he knew how to wait. The texts on his phone proved it. He had been patient, methodical. He had spent months learning Kayla's schedule, her route, her vulnerabilities. He had given her a phone so he could communicate with her directly, bypassing her mother entirely. He had left pennies on her doorstep like a calling card, a way of saying, "I know where you live. I can get this close whenever I want." He wasn't impulsive, he was calculating, and that meant he wouldn't stop just because some bikers had shown up on the street. He would wait, he would watch, and when the attention died down, he would try again, unless someone stopped him first. Doc stood apart from the others, staring at the evidence spread across the hood of his bike: the texts, the CCTV footage, the schedule written in neat handwriting. Kayla's small collection of clues, gathered by a 9-year-old girl who had been trying to save herself because nobody else would. He thought about his niece. Her name was Maya. She had been 12 when it happened, when a man who seemed friendly and helpful and safe had done something unforgivable. Doc had been overseas at the time, serving his 3rd tour, too far away to protect her, too late to do anything but watch the aftermath. Maya had survived, technically. But something in her had broken that year, something that never fully healed. She was 26 now, living in a city far away, and she still flinched when men's voices got too loud. She still checked the locks 3 times before bed. She still carried the weight of what had happened like a stone she couldn't put down. Doc had promised himself, after Maya, that he would never let it happen again. Not to anyone, not if he could help it. And now here was Kayla, 9 years old, blind, alone, being hunted by a man who wore kindness like camouflage. Doc's hands tightened into fists. He had spent 20 years learning how to save lives, how to stop bleeding, how to restart hearts, how to hold broken bodies together until help arrived. But some wounds couldn't be fixed with bandages. Some wounds had to be prevented. He looked at Kayla, sitting on the bench under the streetlight, her white cane resting across her lap. She was so small, so brave. She had been collecting evidence against a predator for weeks, hiding it in the lining of her jacket, waiting for someone, anyone, to believe her. He wasn't going to let her down. "We need a plan," Doc said to the others. "Something that sticks. Something the cops can't ignore." Patch nodded. "What are you thinking?" Doc's jaw tightened. "I'm thinking we make sure this guy never walks free again." Before we continue, hit that like button if you're rooting for Kayla. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Because what happens next? It's the moment everything changes. The next 48 hours moved like a machine, with too many gears. Every biker had a role. Every hour had a purpose. They weren't just angry anymore, they were organized. And organized men, with a mission, are harder to stop than any storm. Doc made the first call. Detective Manny Alvarez picked up on the third ring. His voice was gravel and exhaustion, the kind of tired that comes from 20 years of watching the system grind good intentions into dust. "Marcus," Alvarez said, "it's midnight. This better be good." "It's not good," Doc replied, "but it's necessary." They had history, Doc and Alvarez. 5 years ago, Alvarez's son had gotten mixed up with the wrong crowd. Drugs, debt, the kind of trouble that ends with a body in an alley if you're not careful. Doc had stepped in. Not with violence, with presence. He had talked to the right people, applied the right pressure, and Alvarez's son had walked away clean. The detective had never forgotten. "I need a favor," Doc said. "A real one this time." He explained the situation. Kayla, Gerald Hinton, the texts, the footage, the schedule, the system's failure. The clock ticking toward Friday when Hinton had promised to walk her home. Alvarez was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was heavier than before. "You know I can't just arrest a man based on what you're telling me. I need evidence that'll hold up. I need witnesses. I need something the DA can't throw out." "Then come see for yourself," Doc said. "Friday night. Be there. Watch what happens. And when this guy makes his move, you make yours." Another long silence. Then, "Where?" Doc gave him the address. Kayla's Street, the spot where the sidewalk met the shadow. "I'll be there," Alvarez said. "But Marcus, no bloodshed. You hear me? I can't protect you if someone gets hurt." "Nobody's getting hurt," Doc said, "except the man who deserves it." While Doc worked the legal angle, Patch worked the ground. He spent Tuesday morning at the community center where Gerald Hinton taught ballet. He didn't go inside, that would have been too obvious. Instead, he sat on a bench across the street, watching parents drop off their kids, watching Hinton smile and wave, watching the easy way he moved through a world that trusted him completely. It made Patch sick. He talked to a few parents, casual, friendly, the kind of conversation that doesn't feel like an interrogation until you're already answering questions. "Nice guy, that ballet teacher," Patch said to one mother. "My niece is thinking about taking classes. He any good?" The mother smiled. "Gerald? Oh, he's wonderful. The kids love him. He's so patient, you know. Never raises his voice. Always has time for everyone." Patch nodded, keeping his face neutral. "He ever, I don't know, seem a little too friendly. My sister's protective, you understand." The mother's smile flickered. Just for a second. A shadow passed behind her eyes, there and gone so fast you'd miss it if you weren't looking. "No," she said. "No, he's fine. He's great." But her voice had changed, tighter, higher, the voice of someone who had noticed something once and decided not to think about it too hard. Patch filed that away. He talked to 3 more parents, got the same response, the same flickering smile, the same shadow. They knew. On some level, they knew. But knowing was uncomfortable. Knowing meant doing something, and doing something was hard. So they didn't. Wire worked the digital trail. By Wednesday afternoon, he had mapped Gerald Hinton's entire routine. The man was a creature of habit. Every Monday, he went to the grocery store at 6 p.m. Every Wednesday, he visited his mother at the nursing home. Every Friday, he drove past Kayla's bus stop at exactly 4:47 p.m., the time her school bus dropped her off. He had been doing it for 3 months, every single Friday. Watching, waiting, learning. Wire also found the other phones. Not just the one Gerald had given to Kayla, but 3 more, prepaid, purchased with cash, registered to fake names. The text histories had been deleted, but Wire had ways of recovering things that were supposed to stay buried. The messages were worse than the ones to Kayla, more explicit, more detailed. Conversations with people who shared Gerald's interests, trading tips on how to gain a child's trust, how to isolate them from their parents, how to make them feel special and scared at the same time. Wire printed everything. 53 pages of evidence that the police had never bothered to look for because nobody had asked them to. Nobody had believed a blind girl's story long enough to dig. "This is enough," Wire said, handing the stack to Doc. "This is more than enough." Doc flipped through the pages. His face didn't change, but his hands trembled slightly. Not from fear, from the effort of keeping his rage contained. "Friday," he said. "We end this Friday." The club pooled its resources. Skeets organized a safe house, a small apartment across town where Kayla and Tasha could stay if things went wrong. Patch talked to a lawyer he knew, a woman named Carla Vance, who had built her career on cases the system wanted to forget. She agreed to take Kayla's case pro bono, no questions asked. They raised money too. Not much by some standards, but enough. Gas money, hotel costs, a retainer for Carla, a fund for whatever Kayla might need in the months ahead. 85 men reached into their pockets and gave what they could. Some gave 20s, some gave hundreds. One guy, a mechanic named Dutch, who barely spoke and never smiled, handed over a crumpled envelope with $2,000 in cash. "For the kid," he said. Nothing else. Doc tried to thank him. Dutch just shrugged and walked away. That was the thing about the club. They looked like outlaws. They sounded like trouble. But when it mattered, when a child was in danger and the world looked the other way, they showed up with everything they had. Thursday night, Doc visited Kayla. He found her sitting on her front porch, white cane across her lap, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood, the dog that barked twice, the squeak of Mrs. Lemon's stoop, the distant rumble of traffic on the main road. Doc sat down beside her. For a while, neither of them spoke. "You scared?" he finally asked. Kayla thought about it. "Yes," she said, "but not as scared as before." "Why not?" She turned toward him. Her eyes didn't focus. They never did. But there was something in her face that looked like certainty. "Because now I know what your engines sound like," she said, "and I know you'll come if I need you." Doc's throat tightened. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. A leather patch, hand-stitched, with the number 85 sewn in crude thread. "This is for you," he said, pressing it into her palm. "So you remember, no matter what happens tomorrow, no matter what happens after that, you're not alone. You've got 85 people who believe you, and that's not changing." Kayla's fingers traced the numbers. Her lips trembled. For a moment, she looked like she might cry. Then she tucked the patch into the lining of her jacket, right next to the cracked dime and the folded note. Her secret pocket, her evidence locker, her proof that she had been fighting this whole time. "Thank you," she whispered. Doc nodded, even though she couldn't see it. "Don't thank me yet. Thank me when it's over." Friday came like a held breath finally released. The sun set at 5:23 p.m. By 5:45, the street was quiet. Parents were home from work. Kids were inside doing homework. The dog on the corner barked twice, then stopped. Kayla's bus had dropped her off 40 minutes ago. She was inside now, safe with Tasha, waiting. But they both knew the plan. When the time came, Kayla would walk outside, not far, just to the edge of the porch, and wait. The bait in a trap she had helped design. Doc had argued against it. He didn't like using a child as bait, even with 20 bikers stationed on the street, and Alvarez parked in an unmarked car around the corner. But Kayla had insisted. "He's been following me for months," she said. "He thinks I'm easy. He thinks nobody's watching. Let him think it one more time." So they waited. At 5:52 p.m., a beige sedan turned onto the street. It moved slowly, deliberately. The driver's window was cracked open despite the cold, like someone who wanted to hear what was happening outside. Gerald Hinton. He parked 3 houses down from Kayla's place. Didn't get out right away. Just sat there, watching, the engine idling. Skeets was the first to spot him. He was stationed on a porch across the street, pretending to smoke a cigarette, his bike hidden in the backyard. He keyed his radio twice. The signal. Within 60 seconds, every biker on the street knew Gerald was there. The trap was set. Now, they just had to wait for him to walk into it. Gerald sat in his car for 11 minutes. 11 minutes of watching, 11 minutes of waiting, 11 minutes of calculating risk versus reward, the way he had been calculating for months. He had noticed the extra cars on the street, the unfamiliar faces. Something felt off, but he couldn't place it. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just paranoia. But Kayla was right there, sitting on her porch, alone, her white cane leaning against the railing, her head tilted slightly, listening to sounds he couldn't hear. She looked so small, so vulnerable, so easy. Gerald opened his car door. He walked with confidence. The kind of confidence that comes from getting away with things for years. The kind that makes a man believe he's smarter than everyone else. That the rules don't apply to him. That he can do whatever he wants as long as he smiles enough. He was halfway to Kayla's porch when the first engine started, low, rumbling, coming from somewhere to his left. Gerald stopped, turned, saw nothing but parked cars and dark houses. Then a second engine started, then a third, then 10 more. The sound built like a wave, a rolling thunder that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Headlights snapped on, 1 pair, 5 pairs, 20 pairs. The street lit up like daylight. Gerald's smile faltered. Motorcycles pulled out of driveways, from behind houses, from side streets he hadn't thought to check. They formed a circle around him, tightening slowly, engines growling like wolves who had finally cornered their prey. 85 bikes, 85 men, 85 witnesses. Gerald's confidence cracked. Doc stepped forward first. He didn't rush, didn't raise his voice. He moved the way he moved in the desert, when a patient was bleeding out, calm, deliberate, every action precise. "Gerald Hinton," he said, not a question, a statement. Gerald's eyes darted around the circle, looking for an exit that didn't exist. "Who are you? What is this?" "This is accountability," Doc said. "This is what happens when the system looks the other way and regular people decide not to." He pulled a folder from inside his jacket, opened it, started reading. "September 14th. You parked outside Kayla's bus stop for 23 minutes. Security camera at the liquor store caught your license plate." Gerald's face went pale. "September 21st. You followed her for half a block before turning back. Same camera, same plate." "This is harassment," Gerald said, but his voice had lost its warmth. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but I'll have you arrested, all of you." Doc kept reading. "October 3rd, you left a prepaid phone in her backpack at the after-school program. The texts are interesting." Gerald's mouth opened, closed. His eyes went to Kayla, still sitting on the porch, and for the first time, something other than calculation flickered across his face. Fear. "You've been hunting a 9-year-old girl," Doc said. "A blind girl. You thought nobody was watching. You thought nobody would believe her." He stepped closer. close enough for Gerald to see the coldness in his eyes. You were wrong. Patch stepped forward then, holding something small between his fingers. A penny, dull, ordinary, the kind of thing you'd find on any sidewalk. But Gerald recognized it. His face told the story, the sudden tension in his jaw, the way his eyes locked onto the coin like it was a grenade. Found this in Kayla's pocket, Patch said. She's been collecting them. Every Tuesday, right? You leave one on her doorstep, your little calling card. Gerald said nothing, but his hands had started to shake. Thing is, Patch continued, pennies are small, easy to overlook. But she's blind, Gerald. She notices things other people miss. She's been building a case against you for weeks, all by herself, because the adults in her life let her down. He held the penny up to the light. This one's got your fingerprint on it. We checked. That's when Detective Alvarez stepped out of the shadows. He'd been watching from the unmarked car, waiting for the right moment, waiting for Gerald to incriminate himself, waiting for the evidence to pile up so high that no lawyer could knock it down. Gerald Hinton, Alvarez said, badge in one hand, the other resting on his holster. You're under arrest for stalking, harassment of a minor, and attempted enticement of a child. Gerald's composure finally shattered. This is entrapment, he stammered. You can't do this. I haven't done anything wrong. I was just walking, just taking a walk. Save it for the judge, Alvarez said. He handcuffed Gerald in front of 85 witnesses, in front of neighbors who had finally come outside to watch, in front of a little girl who couldn't see his face but could hear every word. As Alvarez led him to the patrol car, Gerald passed within feet of Kayla's porch. He looked at her one last time, and for just a second, the mask slipped completely. The friendly neighbor, the helpful volunteer, the patient teacher, all of it fell away, and underneath was something hollow and hungry and deeply, deeply wrong. Kayla felt his gaze like a cold wind, but she didn't flinch. She sat up straighter, her white cane in her hand, her chin lifted. She had been afraid of him for months, but right now, in this moment, he was the one who should be afraid. Gerald was pushed into the back of the patrol car. The door slammed. The engine started, and just like that, the monster who had been hunting her for months was led away under a streetlight that looked smaller than the porch lamp he had once used to smile at neighbors. The bikers didn't leave right away. They stayed, engines idling, a wall of chrome and leather between Kayla and a world that had spent too long pretending she was imagining things. One by one, the neighbors started to come out of their houses, not hiding anymore, not pretending they hadn't seen anything. They stood on their porches and their lawns, watching the bikers, watching Kayla, trying to understand what had just happened. Mrs. Lemons, the woman with the squeaky stoop, walked across the street. She was crying. I'm sorry, she said to Kayla. I heard you, months ago. I heard you tell your mama someone was following you. And I didn't do anything. Kayla couldn't see her tears, but she could hear them in the woman's voice. It's okay, Kayla said. You're here now. Mrs. Lemons knelt down and hugged her, held on tight, like she was trying to apologize, with her arms for all the words she should have said. And then something unexpected happened. Other neighbors came forward, one by one, apologizing, admitting they had seen Gerald's car parked outside, admitting they had noticed him walking too close to the bus stop, admitting they had felt something was wrong but hadn't wanted to get involved. The silence that had protected Gerald for so long was finally breaking. Stories like Kayla's remind us why we do this. If this touched you, share it with someone who needs to believe that protection can come from the most unexpected places. Subscribe and hit the bell, because every view, every share, every comment helps us prove the world still has heroes. The first night was the hardest. Tasha held Kayla for hours after the police left, rocking her like she was small again, whispering apologies into her hair. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I should have believed you. I should have fought harder. Kayla didn't say it was okay, because it wasn't okay. Her mother's doubt had been a wound that would take time to heal, but she didn't pull away either. She let herself be held, let herself be small for a little while longer, let the fear she had been carrying alone finally have somewhere to land. The bikers had posted 2 men outside the house, just in case. Just until they were sure Gerald's arrest would stick and no one else was involved. Kayla fell asleep listening to the low rumble of their engines, idling in the dark like a lullaby sung by giants. The system moved slowly. It always does. But this time something was different. Detective Alvarez had pushed the case to the top of the pile. Wire's evidence, the texts, the phone records, the CCTV footage, was damning. The lawyer, Carla Vance, had filed a restraining order within 24 hours. A victim advocate named Sandra came to the house on Saturday morning. She was a soft-spoken woman with kind eyes and a voice like warm tea. She didn't talk to Kayla like she was broken. She talked to her like she was brave. What you did, Sandra said, collecting that evidence, keeping those notes, most adults wouldn't have thought of that. You've been protecting yourself this whole time, Kayla shrugged. Nobody else was going to do it. Sandra's smile faltered for just a moment. The truth in that sentence hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Well, she said, you've got people now. A whole lot of them, from what I hear. Kayla thought about the number 85. Thought about the patch sewn into the lining of her jacket. Yeah, she said. I do. The bikers didn't disappear after the arrest. That's the part nobody expected. In the movies, the heroes ride off into the sunset. They save the day and vanish, leaving nothing but gratitude and fading engine sounds. But real life isn't like the movies. Real life is messier, harder. And real heroes don't just show up for the dramatic moments. They show up for the boring ones, too. Doc came by every Wednesday. He didn't always have a reason. Sometimes he brought groceries. Sometimes he helped Tasha fix things around the house. A leaky faucet, a broken step, the kind of small repairs that pile up when you're a single mother working double shifts. Sometimes he just sat on the porch with Kayla and talked about nothing, about everything, about the sounds of the neighborhood and the smells of the seasons and the way the world felt different now that she wasn't carrying fear alone. You're not just helping her, Tasha said to him one evening, standing in the kitchen while Kayla practiced her cane work in the backyard. You're helping me too, Doc shrugged. Helping one person usually means helping more than one. Tasha's eyes filled with tears. I didn't believe her. My own daughter. I told her she was imagining things. You were tired, Doc said. You were scared. You were doing the best you could with what you had. It wasn't enough. Then do better now. His voice was firm, but not unkind. That's all any of us can do. Fail, learn, and do better. Patch started coming to Kayla's school. It wasn't official at first. He just showed up one Tuesday and asked if they needed any volunteers. The teachers were skeptical. A big man with scars on his face and tattoos climbing up his neck wasn't their usual parent helper. But Kayla vouched for him, and when Patch sat down in the reading corner and started reading aloud to a group of first graders, his deep voice turning picture books into adventures, the skepticism melted away. He read every Tuesday after that. For months, the kids loved him. They called him Mr. Patch and fought over who got to sit closest to him during story time. One day, a little boy asked about the scars on his face. Did a bad guy hurt you? The boy asked. Patch thought about it. Yeah, he said, a long time ago, but I'm okay now. Scars just mean you survived something hard. The boy nodded seriously. I have a scar on my knee from when I fell off my bike. Then you're a survivor too, Patch said. The boy grinned like he'd just been given a medal. Skeets was the hardest to convince. He had scoffed at the whole thing at first, not at helping Kayla. He'd been part of the confrontation, part of the wall of engines that had surrounded Gerald Hinton. But the after stuff, the soft stuff, the showing up every week to read books, to kids' stuff. That's not my style, he said, when Doc suggested he get more involved. I'm not good with feelings. But Kayla changed his mind. It happened 3 weeks after the arrest. Skeets was at the clubhouse, working on his bike, when his phone buzzed. A text from Doc. She's asking for you. Skeets stared at the message, read it twice. Then, without quite understanding why, he got on his bike and rode to Kayla's house. She was sitting on the porch when he arrived. Same spot as always. White cane across her lap, head tilted, listening to sounds he couldn't hear. You came, she said. Skeets grunted. Doc said you were asking for me. I was. She turned toward him. Her eyes didn't focus, but there was something in her expression that felt like she was seeing him anyway. You were the one who spotted him. That night. You were the one who saw him, standing at the edge of the light. Skeets shifted uncomfortably. Yeah, so? So you saved my life. Her voice was matter-of-fact. No drama, no tears, just truth. And I wanted to say thank you. Skeets didn't know what to say. He stood there, hands in his pockets, feeling something shift in his chest. A wall he'd built a long time ago, cracking just a little. You don't have to thank me, he finally said. I just did what anyone would do. No. Kayla shook her head. Not anyone. Just you. Just the 85. Everyone else looked away. She stood up, walked toward him, reached out and touched his arm, finding it by sound, by the way his jacket creaked when he moved. Will you take me somewhere? She asked. Where? The bike show, next Saturday. Doc told me about it. I want to hear the engines. Skeets laughed. It was a rough sound, surprised out of him. You want to go to a bike show, a blind girl at a bike show. I can't see them, Kayla said, but I can hear them, and I want to hear what 200 engines sound like all at once. Skeets looked at her, 9 years old, blind, braver than anyone he'd ever met. All right, he said, next Saturday. I'll pick you up. The bike show was loud. 200 motorcycles, all revving at once. The sound was enormous, a rolling thunder that vibrated in your chest and rattled your teeth. Most people covered their ears. Some children cried. But Kayla laughed. She sat on the back of Skeet's bike, her small arms wrapped around his waist, her face turned toward the sound like it was music. She laughed until tears streamed down her cheeks, until her whole body shook with something that wasn't fear. This is what safety sounds like, she shouted over the roar. This is it. Skeets didn't say anything, but somewhere behind his sunglasses, his eyes were wet. The weeks turned into months. The months started to feel like something new. Kayla went back to school, back to her route, the rusted fence, the hollowed oak, Mrs. Lemon's squeaky stoop. But now, when she walked home, she wasn't alone. Bikers took turns escorting her. Not every day. She didn't need that anymore. But enough that she knew someone was watching. Enough that the neighborhood knew too. Other things changed. Mrs. Lemon started sitting on her porch in the afternoons, watching the street. Mr. Caldwell, the man whose house always felt wrong, started leaving his porch light on at night. The dog on the corner still barked twice when Kayla passed, but now she heard other sounds too. Footsteps of neighbors, walking their kids home, voices saying hello. The small sounds of a community that had decided, finally, to pay attention. The after-school program hired a security guard, added a line item to the budget for safety escorts, started doing background checks on volunteers. Real ones, not the kind that miss things because nobody wants to look too hard. Gerald Hinton went to trial 4 months after his arrest. Wire's evidence held up. The phone records, the texts, the CCTV footage, all of it painted a picture that no jury could ignore. He was convicted on 7 counts: stalking, harassment, attempted enticement of a minor, possession of materials that nobody wanted to describe in detail. The judge gave him 15 years. When the verdict came down, Doc called Kayla to tell her. "It's over," he said. "He's going away for a long time." Kayla was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "It's not over. Not really. But this part is done." Doc understood what she meant. The fear doesn't just vanish when the monster goes away. It lingers. It echoes. It wakes you up at 2 a.m. and makes you check the locks. But she was right. This part was done. And the next part, the healing part, the growing part, could finally begin. Summer came slowly to Westwood. The air got thick and warm. The trees filled out with leaves that rustled in the evening breeze. The sounds of the neighborhood shifted. More children playing, more barbecues sizzling, more laughter drifting from open windows. Kayla sat on her porch, listening to all of it. Her white cane leaned against the railing. Her jacket, the same thin jacket she'd been wearing the night everything changed, was draped over the back of her chair. She didn't need it anymore. The weather was too warm, but she kept it close anyway, because of what was inside, the patch. The one Doc had given her the night before the confrontation, hand-stitched leather, crude thread, spelling out the number 85. She had sewn it into the lining herself, right next to the pocket where she used to keep her evidence, right where the cracked dime and the folded note used to live. The evidence was gone now, handed over to the police, used in the trial, filed away in a courthouse somewhere. But the patch stayed. The patch was hers. And there was something else in there too, something she'd added after Gerald was convicted. The penny, not any penny. The penny, the one he used to leave on her doorstep every Tuesday. The one Patch had held up in front of 85 witnesses. The one that had Gerald's fingerprint on it. Kayla had asked Alvarez if she could keep it. He'd looked at her for a long moment, trying to understand why a little girl would want a reminder of her stalker. "It's not a reminder," she'd explained. "It's proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that I was right. Proof that I fought back." Alvarez had handed it over without another word. Now the penny lived in her jacket lining, pressed against the leather patch. 2 pieces of evidence, one from the monster, one from the heroes, both stitched into the fabric of her life. "What are you thinking about?" The voice came from beside her. "Doc." He'd pulled up a chair without her noticing. Or maybe she had noticed, and had just gotten comfortable enough not to react. "The sounds," Kayla said. "They're different now." "Different how?" She tilted her head, listening. "When I was scared, everything sounded like a threat. Footsteps were always too heavy. Cars were always too slow. Even the quiet parts felt loud, like something was hiding in them." She paused. "But now I hear other things. Mrs. Lemon's humming when she waters her plants. The kids down the block playing tag. Mr. Patterson's radio playing old jazz from his garage." She turned toward Doc. Her eyes didn't focus, but her face was soft, open. "I used to listen for danger," she said. "Now I listen for everything else." Doc didn't say anything. He just sat there, letting the moment breathe. Then Kayla smiled. "And I always listen for your engines, even when you're not coming. I like knowing what they sound like. It helps." "Helps how?" She thought about it. "It reminds me I'm not alone, even when the street is quiet, even when everyone's inside. I know what 85 engines sound like, and I know they'll come if I need them." She reached into her jacket and pulled out the patch, traced the numbers with her fingers. "You know what I call you?" she asked. "In my head?" Doc raised an eyebrow. "What?" "Home." Her voice was quiet, steady, like she'd been waiting a long time to say it. 85 engines. That's what home sounds like now." The story spread, not through newspapers or TV reports. Those came and went, forgotten within a week. It spread the way real stories spread, through whispers, through word of mouth, through people telling people about a blind girl and 85 bikers who answered when the world looked away. Neighbors who had been too tired to test their courage started walking their streets at night, started noticing things, started saying something when they saw cars parked too long or strangers lingering too close. Teachers at Kayla's school started asking better questions, not just, "Are you okay?" but, "What are you feeling?" and, "Is there something you want to tell me?" They started believing kids when their stories didn't make perfect sense, started understanding that sometimes the truth looks different than you expect. Detective Alvarez changed how he took reports. He stopped smiling patiently at worried mothers, stopped dismissing claims without evidence, started treating every complaint like it might be the one that saves a life. The after-school program didn't just add security, they added training, taught staff how to recognize grooming behaviors, taught kids how to trust their instincts, put up posters that said things like, "Your feelings are information," and, "If something feels wrong, tell someone." Small changes, ripples, spreading outward from a single stone dropped in a still pond. Not enough to fix everything. The world was still broken in 1,000 ways, but enough to matter, enough to save someone, somewhere, someday, because that's how change works. Not all at once, not with a single dramatic moment. It works like water on rock, slowly, persistently, one drop at a time. The bikers came back one more time, all 85 of them. It was a Saturday afternoon in August, 3 days before the first anniversary of the night they'd found Kayla on the sidewalk. They didn't announce they were coming, didn't make a production of it. They just showed up. Kayla heard them from her bedroom, that familiar rumble, growing louder, multiplying. She ran to the porch, actually ran, for the first time in months, her cane forgotten inside, and stood at the railing, her face turned toward the sound. 85 engines, 85 leather jackets, 85 men who had spent a year proving that showing up wasn't a one-time thing. They parked along the street in 2 long rows, chrome flashing in the summer sun. One by one, they killed their engines. The sudden silence was almost as loud as the sound had been. Doc walked up the porch steps first. "Hey, kid," he said. "We brought you something." He pressed something into her hand. Cold, metal, shaped like a coin, but thicker, heavier. "What is it?" Kayla asked. "A medallion, custom made." The whole club chipped in. She traced the edges with her fingers, felt the raised letters, the numbers. "It says 85 on one side," Doc explained, "and on the other," he paused, "on the other it says they sound like home." Kayla's breath caught. Her fingers tightened around the metal. "We heard you say that," Doc said quietly. "A few months back. That thing about our engines sounding like home, it stuck with us. Figured we'd make it official." Kayla couldn't speak. Her throat was too tight, but she nodded and nodded again, and held the medallion against her chest, like it was the most precious thing anyone had ever given her. Behind Doc, 84 men stood in the summer heat, watching. Some of them were crying. The big ones, the tough ones, the ones with tattoos and scars and faces that looked like they'd never cried for anything. They were crying now. That night, after the bikers had gone, Kayla sat on her porch one more time. The street was quiet. The sun had set. The sounds of summer had faded into the soft hum of crickets and distant traffic. She held the medallion in one hand. In the other, she held the patch, pulled from her jacket lining, pressed against her palm. Somewhere, far away, an engine rumbled. Just one. Probably someone heading home from work, taking the back roads. Kayla smiled. She pressed her ear toward the sound, listening, remembering. The night she'd been found, the circle of headlights, the promise made in the dark. "We heard you," Patch had said. "You're with us now." She was still with them, and they were still with her. Not physically, not every day, but in the way her ears searched for engine sounds in every silence, in the way her fingers traced the number 85 when she needed to feel strong, in the way she walked through the world knowing that somewhere, someone was paying attention. The rumble faded into the distance. The street went quiet again. Kayla stood up, walked inside, closed the door behind her. She wasn't scared anymore. Not of the dark, not of the silence, not of the footsteps that might or might not be following her. Because she had learned something in the past year, something nobody could take away. She had learned that when the light went out on her own, she could listen. And someone would answer. Thank you for riding with us today. If you believe that sometimes the rumble you hear isn't trouble, it's help on the way, subscribe to Biker's Bite, hit that bell, and tell us in the comments, what would you have done? Because somewhere out there, right now, a child is listening. A child is scared. A child is waiting for someone to show up. Be the engine they hear. Be the 85.